I was with the president when I formally announced I wasn't going to run. He said, come to the White House, let's do it in the Rose Garden, I want to be with you, walk outside. And I said something that was I had no prepared remarks. I said, I have one regret in not being able to run for president and maybe be the next president, is that I won't get to preside over the end of cancer as we know it. From that, later came the State of the Union. The president, without telling me, turns to me and says, Joe's going to do mission control. You know, he never told me I was going to do that. But it was an enormous opportunity. And he gave me across-the-board authority to use every single agency in the government to break down barriers. What I found out, and what you found out dealing with your dad, hard to get information, man.
Yeah.
Hard to get information. Hard to get even his records. Hard to be able to determine what trials were going on that he may qualify for. I mean, it was ridiculous. If we run any other business like that, you'd be out of business. And as one leading cancer specialist said, they're going to look back 50 years from now and say we were barbaric. Only do three things with cancer: identify it, excise it, do a lot of damage around where they find it if they can excise it, then zap it with radiation, which kills a lot of the healthy cells around it, and then put poison in your body called chemotherapy. And so what I found out was that we had reached sort of an inflection point about 4 years before Bo was diagnosed, where you finally had disciplines that were viewed as voodoo science, immunotherapy. Mm-hmm. Immunotherapy was used in 1900. And then it was discarded completely. Using your own immune system to kill the cancers and equip them. So what's happened in the meantime, there's been a number of breakthroughs on particular cancers. The most important thing that's happened now is we're getting to the point where some of the changes the president made at NIH and at the National Cancer Institute, and remember at the very end of the campaign they told us we couldn't pass anything, we passed $6.3 billion for cancer at the end, because cancer is the only bipartisan thing out there, man. And remember, Trump came along and wanted to cut $9 billion from NIH, and they not only didn't cut it, the Republicans, they added $2 more billion. So what is happening now is go to bidencancer.org, because there are a number of breakthroughs and a number of changes made that increase exponentially the chances of the first treatment being the best treatment. For example, right now, I got a call in the middle of the moonshot from the chairman of the board of IBM. Would I like Watson? I said, I beg your pardon. He said, would you like Watson? Well, Watson, the computer, has read every single thing ever written in all of history, not a joke, about cancer. And now we can sequence a cancer genome in a matter of 3 to 5 days. Cost $1,000, not $150,000, which would before. And what we do now at the VA hospital is the largest hospital in the world. Every vet who has cancer gets a human genome sequenced of the cancer, plugs it in, and Watson can tell you every treatment that's ever been used for that cancer. There's 204 cancers out there. Incredible. And they can tell you the percentages, which ones work best for this particular protein on this cancer. So one of the things that happens is when you start off with the wrong treatment, you sometimes do damage. No one did anything wrong with Bo. He had the best care in the world. But, for example, the radiation they used ended up penetrating one of the arteries. So it limited what they could do. It damaged it. So when there are other treatments that came along that may have been more helpful and extending life, they couldn't do it. But that happens to everybody. In addition to that, there are specific cancers now where HPV cancer, there are vaccines now, literally vaccines. We have a whole major initiative. We brought together the entire medical community. They're now cooperating on what they call the Blood Pact. I hate the word pact because to docs it means an agreement. Here it means special interest. Right. But the Blood Pact, for example, they're getting to the point where they can take a blood test from you And the filings from a cancer going through your blood, they can pick up and determine what cancer you have and where it is, and whether it is worth going in to excise it. Will it do more damage or not? And there's enormous change. For example, now you can go on a website and determine. It makes a difference whether, God forbid, somebody else's dad or son or mother or father gets diagnosed with a particular cancer. Well, if you live within the shadow of one of the 21 great cancer hospitals in the world, in the United States, you have access to all the latest technology and all the latest that is that's available. But there are great oncologists in Bemidji, Minnesota, who can determine whether you have cancer, determine what cancer it is, do the genome, but they have no idea where they can go for the one thing that could save your life, being in a cancer study, being in one of these studies that are going on with the drug companies. Mm-hmm. They don't know where they are. Well, up until we started this, people had no idea. Well, I remember Bo was a case of one where they used anti-PD-1 plus they injected a virus into his brain to try to kill the cancer in the brain. I said, how many people else have this worked? We have no idea. We don't think anybody else has had this, but we don't have no idea. How could you not have any idea? Why, with all the technology we have? I can pick up my phone here and find out what movie theater is, what shows are being played in a Cinemaplex in Memphis, Tennessee right now. Why can't you know that? So because of what Brock started, we are making significant strides in knowing what the best treatments are at the front end and what can be done. And we found a sweet spot. The sweet spot is very much in the interest of drug companies to do this, because drug companies want to run these trials. They don't have enough patients. Mm-hmm. They don't know where to find them. So we're marrying them up. Another example holds enormous hope. Up to now, you guys know that, for example, AIDS. Well, we tamed AIDS by and large, but it was no one drug. It was multiple drugs. So you got a lot of these brilliant researchers, and I met with thousands, not a joke, thousands. There's two agencies, two big groups of researchers, that one is made up of 11,000 people and the other is made up of 6,000. I've spoken to them repeatedly, and I go to see them, etc. And what happens is that they know that multiple drugs may work. You guys represent three drug companies A, B, and C. You're all working on the same particular cancer number 172 kind of cancer, okay? Now, you each have a protocol you think may work, but you're going to sink millions and millions of dollars in to determine whether or not it is worthwhile. And a lot of dry holes, like it used to be with oil wells. So we came along, and I said to the experts the president allowed me to pull together in the administration, why can't we ahead of time work out the intellectual property of the value of each of your contributions ahead of time? And then go to the drug companies and say, all of you put all your experimental drugs on the table and let any bona fide researcher come in and use any of them. We'll deal with your liability. We'll deal with the intellectual property. Turned out there were 6 drug companies said okay. Now there's scores, increasing exponentially the prospect that with all these brilliant young and not so young researchers around the world being able to use all the drugs on the table. It's amazing. Last example of why there's hope. One of the things the president allowed me to do was go abroad and meet with heads of state to see if we could sign memorandum of understanding where they would share all of their data that they had. Because what we didn't have before when Nixon declared the war on cancer, he didn't have any army, he didn't have any troops. Everybody thought there was a single cancer. The model was Jonas Salk going into a laboratory and finding the silver bullet. Really? Now 204 cancers identified. We can do 1 million billion calculations a second. Computers can do things in moments that would take Nobel laureates a year to try to figure out patterns. And so we went and there was a place in the National Cancer Institute that had, I think it was 13,000 repositories of tumor tissue, of results of the biopsies, of the cancer genome, all the things relating to an individual patient. Well, now what we've been able to do is take that out. We put it at the University of Chicago, and we made sure it's available to anybody who wants to access it. But now it's up in the tens of thousands. And they said, Biden, this isn't going to make much difference. Within the first 6 months, there were 8 million hits. 8 million times researchers went in to look at this data, increasing exponentially the prospects we can break through. And I get a little too passionate about this, but the point is, I am confident, absolutely confident, we're going to be able to do in 5 years what would otherwise take 10. And mark my words, guys, within the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see start popping up, like, for example, the drug that's keeping Jimmy Carter alive. Mm-hmm. But cancer uses every trick in the book. Cancer masks itself. It's called the blood-brain barrier. When it's in the brain, the immune system can't pick it up saying, I'm not cancer, I'm not cancer. And so they avoid it. They don't try to kill it. Or certain proteins that are on the cancer mask what they are. So that's why these anti-PD-1 drugs are. They're trying to decode for the immune system what is cancer, because the human body and its immune system has the capacity to kill. Why not cancer? Because it hides. It literally says, not me, man. I'm not cancer. I'm good. And I know that sounds silly to say it that way, but that's what it does. Yeah. So there's enormous progress being made.
Mr. Vice President, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
I just want to conclude, if I can. I'm optimistic. I never been more. I know you'd have to deal with it. They say Biden's the White House optimist, like I was the new guy. You know, I always referred to as the White House, the middle-class optimist, right? But I've never been more optimistic in my life. And I wish we'd just pick our heads up and start to move forward. Guys, we have the most productive workforce in the world. 3 times as productive as Asia. It's a fact. We not only have the most powerful military in the history of the world, that's not why the world follows us. They follow us because not the example of our power, but the power of our example. That's how we've been able to organize the world. We also are in a position where we are energy independent in North America. And by 2020, the United States of America will be producing more energy than any single country in the world, including Russia, which is the largest producer now. We're in a situation where we have the most agile venture capitalist. And lastly, there are more great research universities in America than all the rest of the world combined. Not hyperbole. All the rest of the world combined. And every major new life-changing thing that has occurred has come out of the United States. Name me something China has, quote, invented. Anywhere. It's come out of here. Now, maybe a Chinese American has invented it here, which is another asset we have with immigration. But, I mean, there's nothing we can't do. There really is nothing we can't do. And I want your generation and the millennials to say, hey, man, come on. Get out of our way. No, I really mean it.
Yeah, like these Parkland kids.
Yes, I just spoke to them. They're amazing. And by the way, mark my words, they're changing the dynamic. They're changing the dynamic. And what I said to them today, when it was all said and done, or a couple hundred of them, I said, guys, here's the deal. I remember when I was in law school and in college, and I went to my professor when they came to me and said, you ought to run for the Senate at 29 years old. And I said, Professor Ingersoll, I said, the brightest guy ever taught me. And I said, what do you think? He said, I think you have to. I said, but I'm only. He said, Joe, remember Plato. And I went thinking, what to remember Plato? And he constantly would say, paraphrasing Plato, The penalty good people pay, he said men, but the penalty good people pay for not being involved in politics is being governed by people worse than themselves. There's no place to hide. Anyway, thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Great ending.
All right, guys.